Hello and welcome to this ISO 27001 deep dive series. In this new set of videos, we'll dive into the ISO 27001 standard, first from a beginner's perspective, and even to a more advanced view, where we'll look at case studies that will help us even implement it for organizations. For this first video, we'll just do a quick introduction to the ISO 27001 standard, a quick background on information security, and an exploration of what exactly appears on the standard itself. Please subscribe to our channel to follow the rest of the series on ISO 27001 and also share this information because it will be valuable to your friends, maybe in information security, or to people looking to get into the industry. My name is Cyberkach and this is the Cyberkach Podcast. So, like I had said, we'll be going through the ISO 27001 standard across a series of videos. But what we will look at in this first video and what will the training even cover? So first of all, we will explore, like we have said, the ISO 27001 standard. And then the key thing is for everyone that goes through this series of videos to understand how to implement an ISMS. I will explain what each of these keywords mean in due time and what will be the schedule. So just to say, there will be at least 3 videos that cover that will help us implement the goals to explore and implement an ISMS. And the first one, which is what we're looking at right now, is the introduction to the ISO 27001 standard. In the second session, that will focus on building and implementing an ISMS. Now, ISMS is short for Information Security Management System. And in the third section, we'll consider the different ISO 27001 controls and actually practical implementation. Just to say, across these different videos and training sessions, we'll look at sample questions, sample case studies that will prod us in the right direction and help us understand what we're talking about. And also at the end, we'll also consider a major case study where we can put ourselves in the shoes of an organization trying to implement the ISO 27001. So, introduction to the ISO 27001 standard for this first session. But let's dial back a bit then so that we have everyone on board with us. Starting from what information security is. It seems so basic, but it will help us do a very useful introduction to the ISO 27001 standard. Now, we can say, for the sake of our conversation, that information security is the protection of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information systems. So you work in an organization, you have information systems, you have assets, and every activity you are engaged in to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of those assets is information security activities. Now, some of the keywords that we've used in defining information security are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So what does this mean? Now, when you're interested in protecting the confidentiality of an asset, that means you want to prevent unauthorized access. You want to make sure it's confidential. So only people that should have access to that asset have access to the asset. If you're interested in protecting the integrity of an asset, that means you want to prevent unauthorized changes. So an integrity compromise means that there has been an unauthorized change on an asset. And if you are interested in protecting the availability of a system, that means you want to prevent, maybe you want to make sure that it's always online. You want to prevent downtime. So if an asset is available, that means when people want to use it, they find it for use. So another key concept that is very important in explaining information security is the people, process, technology pillars of people, process, and technology. So we could say that cybersecurity, information security, is seriously built on people, process, and technology. Now you have people in the organization, you are unable to implement anything information security without people. Yep. You need to employ people into your information security team. If you're doing security awareness trainings, you are training your people. You even want to trust your people to help you implement some control. So People are very important. They are the backbone of businesses, also the backbone of information security. Processes, definitely. Just to say, process is how an organization carries out certain business functions. So processes are also key to information security. The information security processes, the incident management process. There are so many different types of information security processes. So these are key to information security. And as we may expect, technology as well is also so important to information security. In fact, that is what we'll probably be most conversant with. There are so many Infosec technology, like the SIEM tools, antivirus, all of those tools help us achieve our information security goals. So people, process, technology, important to information security, availability, confidentiality, integrity are the key things that we want to achieve in information security. So before we go further, then let's just do a quick test. So you're watching this video, just to say, as you're watching this video, you can do this by yourself, pause it a bit, think of what you think the answer would be. We'll look at what the answer will be shortly. So the first question, these are all easy speed test questions to get our minds up to speed, if you will. What does the C in CIA triad stand? Is it control? Is it confidentiality? Is it compliance? And continuity? So you can pause, think about it, and yes, that would be confidentiality. The C in CIA triad stands for confidentiality, integrity, availability, which are the three pillars, if you will, of information security. And the next speed test question, which of the following would you say is an example of a threat? Is it weak password? Is it fire in the data center? Is it antivirus? Or is it encryption? So you pause, think about it, and then you can play to see the answer. That will be fire in the data center. This possible threat of fire in the data center. Yes, that is a threat. The third question, what do you think is the purpose of the ISO 27001 standard? Is it to provide guidelines on IT infrastructure? Is it to specify how to manage information security risks? Is it to regulate internet usage or to protect physical equipment? Once again, pause, think, answer, and then you can play. Yep, so that will be to help organizations specify how they manage their information security risks. That's one of the key purposes of the ISO 27001 standard. The fourth speed test question now, true or false? Confidentiality ensures that only authorized people can access sensitive information. Is it true or false? Pause, think, answer, play. That will be true. Yes, that's what confidentiality does. And the final question, people, is which of the following is not a component of an ISMS? So this is a fairly tricky question because we haven't covered it. Is it policies and procedures, asset inventory, marketing strategy, or risk assessment? Which of the following is not a component of an ISMS? And that will be marketing strategy, yes. So every other thing is a key part of ISMS. So let's continue. Now, just to discuss a few more concepts that will help us understand what the ISO 27001, what the ISO 27001 standard is about. First, we look at risk, threats, and vulnerabilities. Basic definitions. So what is a threat? We can say a threat is any event, a circumstance, or even a person with the potential to cause harm to our organization's information assets. We can then go further to say that threat actors are sources of threats. What are vulnerabilities? Vulnerabilities would be any weaknesses of an information asset or even the controls in an organization that can be exploited so that an event with a negative consequence occurs. And to sum it up, a risk would be the potential that threats will materialize or that threats will exploit vulnerabilities of information assets to cause harm to an organization. So, a practical example, there's a very common threat that every organization faces, the threat of a data breach. Now, these could materialize because there are vulnerabilities, there are no data loss prevention controls in the organization, or that the staff in the organization do not have the adequate security awareness training. So those are possible vulnerabilities that could lead the threat of a data breach from materializing. And the risk is the likelihood, the probability, or the potential that threats will materialize. So just to say, there could be vulnerabilities not just in technology, there could be vulnerabilities even in the process. There could be vulnerabilities in training for the people. An example of a process vulnerability is the lack of the maker checker process for key processes. So then moving one step further, we then look at the role of standards in information security. So because we are interested in the ISO 27001 standard, but there are so many different standards in information security that which you may want to know about. First of all, there's the ISO, there are actually several ISO standards, but we're interested in the ISO 27001. There is also the Digital Operational Resilience Act, which is a recent act in the EU. There is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which is very popular in the US. And interestingly, last year, the NIST 2.0, the new NIST Cybersecurity Framework came out, which places a lot of responsibility on govern. So there's the govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, which are the different pillars of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. All of us know about the GDPR, also in the EU, which is interested in handling of personal data, data subjects data. There is also this standard here, the COVID Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology. COVID is big on IT governance. It's definitely what they are interested in, what the standard is interested in. You can also see the PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, which provides like rules or guidelines to help organizations that handle card or credit card information or cardholder data. So yes, if your organization handles cardholder data, credit card information, then you most likely definitely have to comply with the PCI DSS standard. But today we are looking at the ISO 27001 standard, but generally, why do standards matter? First of all, they help organizations protect sensitive information to different extents. The requirements of the standards, if organizations follow them, then they would be better off in protecting their sensitive information. They ensure compliance with legal regulatory requirements. Some of these are strong requirements. GDPR, PCI DSS, for example, are strong requirements to anyone that falls within the context. They help foster trust with customers and stakeholders. That is definitely true, like the ISO standard, for actually any of the standards. And they enable continuous improvement in security practices. So just to know, this is why standards would matter. And that also goes a long way in saying why we need standards in information security. Consistency and uniformity, we've already said that. Processes, technologies, systems that are implemented across organizations can be consistent and uniform. There's actually a lot, I will pick out trust and confidence here to discuss. Now, if your organization, let's say you're a payment service provider, for example, and your organization is ISO 27001 certified as an organization, potential companies who are looking for payment service providers to include on their maybe applications, web applications, will trust you more than an organization that is not ISO 27001 standard. Yeah, so this is one of the key things that standards helps organizations to, because is a generally agreed way to say, fair enough, this organization has met some minimum level of security internally without having to go through their internal systems to find out, because someone else, in giving them the ISO 27001 certification, has done the assessment. So this is one of the key roles, or this is one of the key reasons why we need standards in information security. Now, moving squarely then to the ISO 27001 standard. What is the ISO 27001 standard? And now, this is one of the standards. We have looked at several standards. This is a standard that provides requirements for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and even continuously improving an information security management system. So the key goal of the ISO 27001 standard is that organizations can implement an ISMS. ISMS is basically a management system that allows them to manage their information security. And the goal of ISO 27001 standard is to help organizations manage their sensitive systems, remain secure. That's a very basic goal. And this ISMS, the management system, is the way that they do it by applying a risk management process. Now, the ISO 27001 standard is applicable to all types of organizations. We had looked at the previous pages where some standards apply to specific people. For example, the PCI DSS applied to organizations that process card holder information or credit card data. But the ISO standard, while it's not compulsory, can be used by any type of organization, commercial enterprise, government agency, non-profits, wherever they are in the world, regardless of size, sector, or geographical location. And it helps this organization by covering the process, technology, and people, focusing on the managing risks related to information security. So this standard is very much risk-based. Some quick history, first published in 2005, now revised in 2013. So just to say, there is a new ISO 27001 standard, the ISO 27001 2022, which most organizations are expected to move over to in 2025. So just to say, that is the latest ISO 27001 standard, the 2022 version. And this is a short snapshot from the ISO website. You could purchase the ISO 27001 standard by going to this website. You can see the 2022 version is the latest and is the one on sale. Yeah. So another short break, another short brainstorming activity for us. So I will show us a short case study. You can think about it, you pause, you try to give yourself the answers. Hopefully you get it right. So you work in a tech organization. Take a minute to think and highlight what you think are the three most important benefits of ISO 27001 for your organization. So you can pause the video, think about this, write it down for yourself, and we move on. So what are the key benefits then of the ISO 27001 standard? Now, the standard is big on risk management. It helps organizations to identify, assess, and manage their risks, because the standard is very much, very big on risk management. It helps in legal and regulatory compliance. It helps you in other compliance efforts that you have, whether it's GDPR, HIPAA, even PCI DSS, because some of these controls in different compliance standards overlap. We've talked about reputation and trust. If you and a different organization are going for some business deal, being certified in ISO 27001 and they are not, it could say that you have better capability to handle customer data. So customers will probably trust you more with their sensitive data. And this could lead to maybe sometimes some competitive advantage. Now, also a key benefit, because the ISO 27001 is also huge on continuous improvement. You would see that your organization continuously improves in their security program, which is very valuable if you work in the information security industry, continuous improvement. So now let's take a look at the structure of this ISO 27001 standard. What is the structure of the ISO 27001 standard? Now, we'll discuss this in something called the Annex SL and high-level structure. Just to say, the Annex SL is a framework developed by the ISO to help them have similar structure across all their standards or all the management system standards. So it provides, this Annex SL provides a common framework. So all ISO standards have a similar framework so that there's a consistency, whether you're doing 9001, whether you're doing 27001, they have a similar structure. Now, this similar structure is helpful because it means when you have implemented one ISO standard, it's easier to then implement another standard because, oh, it's very similar to the previous one, just probably the controls that are different. You have to go through the same 10 steps, if you will. And the high-level structure of the ISO standard consists of 10 clauses that form the core structure of ISO standards, including the ISO 27001 standard. And what are these 10 clauses? So first, for you to go through implementation of the ISO 27001 standard, let's focus on that. You have to go through these 10 clauses. First, you want to define a scope, which are the boundaries of your information security management system. In subsequent videos, we'll be able to go through these 10 clauses step by step and in detail. So this is just a summary. First is the scope, having you define the boundaries of the ISMS. Normative references, this is just references to other documents that may be relevant for understanding the ISO 27001 standard. Also, terms and definition is a definition of important terms used in the standard. Now, context of the organization is where it gets interesting for you. Because when you want to use the ISO 27001 standard, after defining your scope, you must make sure that you describe what is the context of your organization. So what are the external and internal factors that will affect your ISMS? Yep. Are you in multiple different countries? Are you in Germany and Spain and the UK? Does this cover HR? Does this cover all the different business units? So what context? What are the things that will be inputs to the ISMS? What will affect it from an internal and external perspective? Leadership means definitely top management have roles to play. If top management does not support the ISMS, it will not take off. So this is so important that it has a different clause on its own. Planning, meaning establishing risk management processes. Now, we had said earlier that the ISO 27001 is huge on risk management. So the whole planning steps is all about planning for your risk management processes and objectives because it's very important in implementing an ISMS. Support, meaning what are the necessary resources? What is the communication? What is the documentation required for this ISMS? What are the things that will make sure that this ISMS continues to work? Operation, the clause, covers the different execution, what you have to do to implement or execute the ISMS processes and handle the risks that have been identified. Performance evaluation and improvement, I'll just talk about together. Like we had said, ISO 27001 is big on continuous improvement. So this means we have to continuously monitor your ISMS to know, first of all, has there been a change in context? Are we moving into a new country, for example? So if maybe your organization expands to a new country and the ISMS has to cover that new country, that's a change in context. And we realize that if you are continuously monitoring an ISMS. Now, if when we monitor our ISMS, continuously review the ISMS, we can find out maybe different areas of possible improvement. Now, these 10 clauses, the backbone of an ISMS. Now, if you're able to implement all of these 10 clauses, you've gone a long way in setting up a fairly good running ISMS for your organization. Before we then go into details for those, one more thing I want to look at, which is after the 10 clauses, there's another section of the ISO standard called the Annex A controls. Now, these Annex A controls are the set of security controls, 93 security controls in the ISO 27001 2022. So just to see, the 2013 standard had 114 controls, and some of them were merged in the 2022 update. So now there are 93 security controls in the ISO 27001 standard, and these are these different security controls that an organization is expected to pick from or while they are setting up their ISMS to help them comply with the requirements of the standard. Now, these 93 controls are split into 4 themes. You have the organizational controls, which is the policies, procedures, risk management, and the organizational structure. You have people controls, which cover things like training, awareness, and HR security controls. You have physical controls, which is interested in the physical security of the organization, the assets. And then there's the technology controls, which all converse with security measures related to IT systems. Now, what is the purpose of these Annex A controls? Remember, there are 10 clauses, first of all, that help you to set up an ISMS. And then there's an Annex A with 93 controls. We have this Annex A controls because they are then a practical guide after we set up an ISMS for mitigating risks that are specific to our information assets. So you can pick a control that says that new staff must have background checks done on them. That's a people control. And so it's a very practical line statement for you to implement in your organization after setting up the 10 clause ISMS. Definitely just to point out that not all controls are mandatory, not all 93 are mandatory. Each organization will need to select controls based on their risk profile or the context of the organization. So, for example, if I run a fully online business, that means some of the physical security controls may not apply to me. Now, how do I know the ones that apply to me and the ones that don't? How do I highlight or outline the ones that apply to me and the ones that don't? Using something called the statement of applicability. So the statement of applicability is a document the organization will use to highlight which controls apply to them, stating reasons, excluding the ones that they say don't apply to them. It's a very important document in the certification process. Now, one more concept in the ISO 27001 implementation is something called the plan, do, check, act cycle. Something called the plan, do, check, act cycle. Now, the plan, do, check, act cycle essentially is a foundation for implementing and managing an effective ISMS. If your ISMS is going to be effective, then you must be doing some form of this cycle because it supports continuous improvement. So you plan, you implement, you review, you improve. You can see here, plan is maybe plan a change or test aimed at improvement. Do is carry out the change or test. Check is study the results. And act is adopt the change or abandon it. But just to say plan, do, check, act is very important in the ISMS implementation phase. Let's look at this in details. In the context of ISMS, what exactly is plan? For example, the plan phase, the organization could identify their security risks and set objectives. Now, this is definitely reflected in the 10 clauses. But some of the key elements to mention here is that you have to define the ISMS scope, identify a security risk, develop some policy, select controls based on risk assessment. Now, when you're in the do phase, what exactly are you doing? It involves the implementation of the plans and processes that you've done in the plan phase. And these controls that you've selected, you have to implement them, assign roles and responsibilities in your organization, roll out trainings that are necessary, and begin operating the ISMS. Check, which is where you monitor and review the ISMS. In the check phase, we want to evaluate the effectiveness of our ISMS. So maybe conduct internal audits, maybe perform reviews against KPIs, and obviously identify non-conformities or areas that we want to improve. Now we've planned, we've done, we've checked, we have to act. And this follows checking. So in the act phase, organization work on continuous improvement. Any issues, non-conformities that were identified in the check phase, we then try to correct. So implement corrective actions and review everything to ensure that they align with organizational goals. Now, once again, let's do a quick scenario analysis. Here, we will do a short test, and your goal this time around is to identify the asset, the vulnerability, the threat, and the control from this scenario. So I will show us the scenario, you read through it, you pause, try to identify the asset, the vulnerability, the threat, and the control, and then you can play and we see what is happening. Now, the scenario is that there's been a data breach at TechCo. TechCo is a mid-sized software development company. This is the background. And TechCo manages sensitive customer information, including names, emails, addresses, and even payment details. Now, the company recently suffered a data breach leading to the exposure of thousands of customer personal and payment information. Here's the details of that data breach. An employee clicked on a phishing email, which installed malware on their computer. Now, the malware on the employee's computer granted the attacker access to company's internal logs, internal network. Now, due to inadequate network segmentation, the attacker was able to move laterally and access database information, customer data. And the customer discovered this breach 2 weeks later when unusual activity was noticed on the server logs. So here is your task. What are the assets? What are the vulnerabilities? Or what is the vulnerability? What are the threats? And what are the controls? You can pause, identify some of them. I will continue to the video. Okay. So I'm just going to give one example of each. There probably will be more asset vulnerability, threat, and controls if you go through this. But for the sake of this scenario, we can say that assets is the customer data, customer information that was attacked. It's valuable to the business, it's an asset. Now, what was the vulnerability? There are multiple vulnerabilities because there are different stages of this attack, but we can say that one key vulnerability was inadequate network segmentation, which allowed the lateral movement to even for the hackers to access more data, quote. Now, what was the threat? Definitely there was a threat of a data breach, which is what happened. And what control do we see here? Well, it's an attack that happened, but we can see maybe there's some sort of review that happens in the organization because you can see here, they noticed in their server logs that a breach happened. So maybe they got an alert, detective control in that instance. So it's probably one of the controls that we can pick out from this scenario. But this is a short scenario analysis just to help us be able to identify assets, vulnerabilities, threats, and controls from given scenarios and even in our organization. Now, moving into more details about understanding what exactly the ISMS is. A simple definition, we've used ISMS repeatedly. Now, an ISMS is a systemic approach for managing sensitive information, ensuring CIA. Yep. And just to say, when you are following and implementing the 10 clauses of the ISO 27001, that is you implementing an ISMS because the 10 clauses give you a management system for taking care of your information security. And ISMS stands for Information Security Management System. Now, key objectives of ISMS obviously is to protect CIA, manage security risks, and ensure regulatory compliance to some extent. And these are some of the key elements. Now, what is the risk? We discussed before, possibility of threat, exploiting vulnerability, leading to loss to the business. Risk, if we want to be specific, the risk formula, one of the risks formulas is likelihood times impact. We'll discuss this in another video. And then context, just to give some context of risk in ISO 27001, risks to information assets must be identified, assessed, and treated to help mitigate potential impacts. We've also talked about the vulnerabilities and every weakness in the environment that could lead to a security incident. We could have technical vulnerabilities on patch software. We could have organizational vulnerabilities, some lack of trainings, ineffective policies, and vulnerabilities, just to say, increase the likelihood of the risk materializing. What is an asset? An asset is anything of value to an organization. We could have some information asset, like the customer data that was breached in our previous example, physical or different human assets. In ISO 27001, it's probably very important to identify and categorize your assets for easier risk assessment and for easier management. IT asset management is a huge subset of information technology, IT asset management. Now, what is a threat? We've looked at this again, a potential event and action that could exploit a vulnerability, resulting in damage to an organization. We could have external threats. We could even have internal threats like insider attacks, insider misuse, accidental data leaks, etc. Understanding the threats to your business, just to say, helps you develop adequate controls to mitigate and manage those threats. And this is another keyword we've used repeatedly. What is a control? So this is any safeguard that we put in place to mitigate risk or to manage a risk, to protect the assets, or to even ensure compliance to maybe our security policies. So if you have a firewall, if you have an antivirus, that is some form of preventing controls that's protecting the systems. If you have monitoring systems that can detect maybe attackers in your environment, that's some sort of detective controls. And there are also obviously other types of controls like corrective controls. Now, in ISO 27001, controls are selected based on the results of a risk assessment, and you make sure that you document that in your statement of applicability. These we'll definitely go through in more detail in subsequent videos. Now, your organization wants to get an ISO certification. Just a quick summary of the different ISO certification steps. Definitely, you want to do a gap assessment. This is assuming that you have implemented an ISMS in our organization already, and you say, oh, maybe in the next 3 months, we want to get ISO 27001 certified. Now, you do a gap assessment, which is conducting a review to identify gaps between your current state and what is stated in ISO 27001 requirements. You want to create an action plan in case maybe there's been some context changes or there are just some gaps between you and your target state. You create an action plan to implement those, and you implement them. Now, after doing that, many organizations then, to prep for the actual ISO 27001 audits, conduct internal audits, which is having the internal audit team sometimes regularly or before an audit assess the ISMS effectiveness. Now, the main way to then get the ISO 27001 certification is to request a certification audit from a certification body. And there are two main stages of that certification: the documentation review, which is stage 1 audit, and the stage 2 audit, which is a full evaluation of your ISMS implementation and effectiveness. Now, staying on certification bodies and external audits, just to explain, to get an actual ISO 27001 certification as an organization, you have to call an external body to audit you. That's the external audit. And these are called certification bodies, independent organizations that evaluate and certify compliance with the ISO 27001. And these certification bodies have to be accredited. So just make sure that you're inviting a certification body to give you an ISO 27001 audit. Make sure that they are accredited. The accreditation just ensures that the certification body follows these given standards to confirm their competence. Now, for your organization to maintain certification, you have to keep up with a few things. Surveillance audits by the certification body just conducted annually. Recertification after every 3 years. So just to say, in 2025, all organizations or all firms that are ISO 27001 certified have to move over to the ISO 27001 2022 certification. But yes, every 3 years, there's a recertification audit, and definitely to maintain your certification, you have to be committed to plan, do, check, act, continuous improvement. So just to close this then, let's do a quick closing exercise. You do it on your own. You read through them, pause and think about it, and you can document your answers. You can actually also send us the answers. You can send it as a chat in the video text box, or you can send us an email at hello@cyberkach.com. What is this closest case then? So this is just for us to identify risks and define ISMS scope. Now the goal is for you to think about basic risk identification and how to identify the scope of an ISMS. We've looked at what an ISMS is. The goal here is identify basic risks and define the scope of an ISMS. So you work for a small e-commerce organization that handles customer data, payment details, logistics. Please define the scope of your ISMS and identify key risks. So for the first step, what is the ISMS scope? What does it cover? Just customer data protection, just payment security. Step two, what are the potential risks that could impact your company? Yep. Remember, you're an e-commerce company. I'm just giving us examples so that we know what kind of responses we should think about. And step three, for each risk, maybe the risk of a data breach, describe its potential impact and what likelihood it is. Example response. Let's say I work in this e-commerce company. Now I could say, oh, the ISMS that we're about to set up covers everything related to our payment system and customer data protection. Now the scope depends on your business objectives. Some scopes for different businesses will be bigger than others. Now in the step two, I'm then identifying some of the potential risks that could impact our customer data protection, our payment security system. And it could be, there could be the possible materialization of a data breach, customer data. There's a risk that untrained employees would set off some insider attack that could even be malware that affects our payment security system. So those are potential risks that could compromise these assets in our ISMS scope. Now, for the data breach, I could say, what could be the potential impact of the data breach? The potential impact could be that we're getting a fine of 10 million because of EU GDPR breaches. We are losing some trust from the customers and they have to move to another e-commerce company. Those are both potential impacts. And then what's the likelihood that it could happen? Just to say, to find out likelihood that something could happen, you may need some additional information. Do we have controls existing? Are there vulnerabilities? But let's just say it's a low likelihood that this could happen. So this is the kind of thing you want to think about when you're defining the scope for your ISMS and identifying key risks. So please take a second and do this for yourself before we continue. So just pause, think, respond, and then play. So, well, thank you very much. Today we've been talking through an introduction to the ISO 27001 system. But please ask us your questions. You can put in questions in the chat, in the YouTube chat. You can even send your questions directly to us at hello@cyberkach.com. You can message our YouTube channel at the Cyberkach Podcast. But please ask us your questions. We're ready to talk you through any challenges you have. Like we had said, this is we are running multiple videos where we go deep into the ISO 27001 standards. We expect there may be some questions. Now, in the next session, today we've done a quick introduction to the ISO 27001 standard. In the next session, we will take a look at building and implementing an ISMS, which is the main thing in ISO 27001 standard. So it's a very key session. Make sure you watch this video. First, we'll look at scoping and risk assessment, the different ISO 27001 clauses, and statements of applicabilities, which interestingly, some people seem to miss out or not even to know about. So we'll look at this at the next video. Just make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit the subscribe button and look out for this video, or just go to our channel on YouTube at the Cyberkach Podcast and you will see this next session. Thank you very much and see you. Thank you for watching the Cyberkach Podcast. Please subscribe and like and share this video to your network. They may find the ISO 27001 very useful in their information security journey. Thank you so much. My name is Kachi, and this has been the Cyberkach Podcast.